Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and thought, why am I freezing under all of this? You've got a thick mattress, a plush comforter, maybe even one of those expensive cooling gel memory foam setups that promised perfect temperature regulation. And yet, at 3:17 a.m., you're curled into yourself like you're camping in the woods. Here's the uncomfortable truth no bedding company wants you to hear. Your mattress might be making you cold. For 200 years before central heating, before a memory foam, before coordinated bedding sets with 10 decorative pillows, Americans survived brutal winters in cabins with gaps between the logs. Soldiers slept in drafty wooden barracks where wind slid across the floorboards like a knife. Farmers woke up to frost forming on the inside of their bedroom walls. And somehow, they slept warmer. Not because they were tougher, not because they didn't complain, and definitely not because their blankets were thicker. They slept warmer because they understood something we've forgotten. Warmth is not about how much you pile on top of yourself. It's about how well you protect the heat your body is already producing. Modern culture sold us the idea that comfort comes from buying better products. Thicker comforters, softer fabrics, bigger mattresses, heated pads, smart thermostats. But warmth doesn't come from technology, it comes from physics. And physics doesn't care how expensive your bed was. Let's start with the biggest myth in modern sleep culture. Most people think heat rises. You've heard that phrase your entire life. Heat rises. So naturally, you throw more insulation on top, thicker duvet, heavier quilt, maybe even two. But while heat can rise, it also moves in other ways, and the most brutal way it moves at night is downward. When you lie on a mattress, your body is pressed against a large, dense surface that is colder than you are. Heat always moves from warmer to colder, always. Your mattress doesn't care that it's premium. It doesn't care that it's memory foam or gel-infused or orthopedic. It acts like a thermal sink. It absorbs your body heat hour after hour. You could stack 5 comforters on top of yourself, but if the heat beneath you is being pulled away continuously, you will wake up cold. 200 years ago, people understood this instinctively. They didn't start their bedding system with what went on top. They started with what went underneath. Wool blankets were often laid beneath the sleeper before anything else, not for comfort, not for aesthetics, but for insulation against ground conduction. Because the ground, or even a wooden floor, can steal heat faster than the air above you ever will. During World War II, cold weather survival manuals emphasized one principle above all others: insulate from below first. Soldiers were taught that ground conduction could kill faster than freezing air. Native tribes in the northern plains layered furs and woven mats beneath their bodies before wrapping anything overhead. Early American settlers placed straw, wool, or extra folded blankets under their hips and shoulders specifically to reduce conductive heat loss. They weren't guessing, they were observing. If you wake up cold, it's often not because your room is too chilly. It's because your heat is leaking downward. Now think about your own bed. When was the last time you added insulation beneath you? Most modern bedding ads never even mention it. They show luxurious duvets floating like clouds. They talk about thread count. They obsess over softness. But softness doesn't equal insulation. In fact, many modern foam mattresses store and redistribute heat unevenly. They absorb warmth early in the night, then slowly cool as your body temperature drops during deeper sleep cycles, creating that sudden 3 a.m. chill. Your body temperature naturally dips during sleep. If the surface beneath you is already pulling heat away, that dip feels dramatic, and you wake up cold, anxious, restless. 2 centuries ago, people didn't have the luxury of waking up cold repeatedly. Cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. So they built systems. Not products, systems. They understood a second principle that modern bedding culture almost completely ignores. Warmth does not come from thickness, it comes from trapped air. This is where things get counterintuitive. A massive, puffy comforter looks warm. It feels warm when you first slide under it. But warmth isn't stored in the fabric. It's stored in still air. The job of insulation is not to create heat. It is to trap the heat your body is already producing inside pockets of unmoving air. That's why multiple thin layers often outperform one heavy layer. Our ancestors layered strategically. A cotton sheet near the skin, a wool blanket above that, a quilt pressing everything down. Each layer served a role. The cotton helped manage surface moisture. The wool trapped air even when slightly damp. The quilt added gentle compression, preventing gaps where warm air could escape. Most importantly, they tucked the edges tightly. They didn't drape blankets loosely like decorative throws. They sealed them. Shoulders, sides, feet. Because every untucked edge is a chimney. Every gap at your neck is a heat leak. Modern sleepers shift, roll, and unconsciously create openings all night long. Warm air drifts out, cold air slips in, the microclimate collapses. Then we blame the blanket. But the blanket wasn't the problem. The system was incomplete. Imagine your bed not as a pile of soft objects, but as a thermal envelope. Your body generates heat constantly, even in sleep. That heat fills a small pocket of air around you. If that pocket is sealed, it stabilizes. If it's open, it dissipates. 200 years ago, people wrapped themselves with intention. They folded blankets beneath their lower back. They wrapped sections around their feet like a cocoon. They overlapped layers across their shoulders. They weren't trying to look cozy. They were building a personal climate chamber. It's the same principle behind a modern sleeping bag, but instead of relying on zippers and synthetic fill, they relied on technique. Technique survives power outages. Technique survives winter storms. Technique costs almost nothing. Now let's talk about the third silent enemy of warmth: moisture. This is the part most people never consider. Even if you don't feel sweaty at night, your body releases moisture continuously, through breath, through skin, through microscopic perspiration. When moisture evaporates, it steals heat. This process is called evaporative cooling, and it is brutally efficient. If your bedding traps moisture against your skin, you will lose heat faster, no matter how thick your blanket is. This is where wool becomes almost magical. Wool fibers have a natural crimp that creates tiny air pockets. But more importantly, wool can absorb moisture vapor while still retaining insulating properties. It pulls moisture away from your skin before it can evaporate and rob heat. Synthetic fibers often do the opposite. They trap moisture. They feel warm at first, but as the night progresses and humidity builds within the bedding, they become clammy. Cold creeps in slowly. You toss, you wake, and you assume you need a thicker comforter. But what you may actually need is better moisture management. For centuries, wool appeared everywhere survival in the cold was non-negotiable. Shepherds in the mountains, sailors on open decks, soldiers in trenches. Not because wool was trendy, because it worked. And here's the deeper truth. Our ancestors didn't romanticize hardship. They optimized survival. They didn't have uniform bedding sets, nothing matched. A cotton sheet from one source, a wool army surplus blanket, a handmade quilt stitched from scraps. It wasn't aesthetic, it was functional. Modern bedding culture prioritizes appearance and convenience, coordinated sets, single material solutions, one comforter to do it all. But insulation is a system problem. Moisture control, air trapping, compression, sealing, bottom insulation. No single synthetic blanket excels at all of them simultaneously. When central heating became common, we stopped needing to think about these mechanics. The room temperature was stable, the risk was lower. Comfort became automated. And when comfort is automated, knowledge fades. We forgot how heat actually behaves. But now think about the present moment. Winter storms that knock out power grids, ice, collapsing transformers, rural areas waiting days for repairs, energy costs rising. Suddenly, your bed isn't just for rest, it's a shelter. And a shelter must manage heat intelligently. The old blanket technique isn't nostalgia, it's resilience. If the power goes out tonight, what keeps you warm? A programmable thermostat won't help. A decorative duvet won't help if moisture builds and loft collapses. But a properly layered system beneath and around you? That works without electricity, without technology, without branding. Here's what's fascinating. Many Americans who struggle with sleep anxiety during winter aren't anxious because of stress alone. They're physiologically unsettled. Your body craves thermal stability during sleep. When temperature fluctuates sharply, your nervous system stays partially alert. You never fully relax. You wake up tired. Cold becomes stress. Stability becomes calm. 200 years ago, they didn't have perfect insulation, but they had consistency. Their microclimate, once built correctly, remained steady through the night. Not luxurious, but stable. And stability is what the body truly wants. Tonight, before you buy anything new, try something radical. Add a dense layer beneath you. Seal the sides of your blankets intentionally. Layer thin materials instead of one bulky one. Focus on trapping still air, not adding weight. You might discover that warmth isn't about upgrading your bed, it's about understanding it. And once you understand it, you realize something empowering. You don't need more insulation. You need a better system. Because warmth isn't purchased, it's engineered. And the engineering starts with knowledge older than electricity, older than foam, older than marketing. Knowledge that kept generations alive through winters far harsher than ours. If this is making you rethink your bed right now, good. Because in part 2, we're going deeper. We're breaking down exactly how to build your own heat envelope step by step. Why modern mattresses are engineered in ways that sabotage thermal stability, and the subtle mistakes almost everyone makes every single night. And once you see it, you'll never crawl into bed the same way again. Let's get practical, because once you understand that your mattress can steal heat, that trapped air matters more than thickness, and that moisture quietly sabotages warmth, the next question becomes obvious. How do you actually build a bed that works? Not a bed that looks good in a catalog, a bed that performs. The first step is counterintuitive. Stop thinking about what goes on top of you. Start with what goes under you. If you're sleeping directly on foam, you're lying on a giant heat absorber. Foam doesn't insulate in the way most people assume. It stores heat temporarily, then redistributes it as your body temperature drops during the night. That shift is often what wakes you up cold at 2 or 3 a.m. To interrupt that process, you need a buffer layer. A dense wool blanket is ideal. If wool isn't available, even a tightly folded cotton blanket is better than nothing. The goal is simple. Create a thermal barrier between your body and the mattress. You're not adding softness, you're blocking conduction. Place that layer directly beneath your torso and hips. That's where most body heat is generated and lost. If you want to feel the difference immediately, try doubling the blanket beneath just your core area for one night. Most people are shocked at how much warmer they feel without adding anything on top. Now let's move to layering. Instead of relying on one oversized comforter, think in terms of controlled air pockets. Start with a breathable base layer close to your skin. Cotton works well here because it manages surface moisture and feels stable against the body. On top of that, add a wool blanket or any insulating layer that maintains loft under light compression. Then comes something most people ignore: gentle weight. A quilt or slightly heavier top layer presses the insulating layer beneath into a tighter seal, not crushing it, just stabilizing it. That pressure reduces gaps that allow warm air to drift away. It's not about heaviness for comfort, it's about preventing airflow disruption. But the real transformation happens at the edges. This is where almost everyone loses heat. Your shoulders and neck are major escape points. Warm air rises toward your collarbone and slips out the moment there's an opening. If you leave a gap there, you're essentially building a chimney. Instead, pull the upper layer slightly around your shoulders. Not tight enough to restrict movement, just enough to reduce open air exchange. At your sides, tuck lightly under your hips. You don't need to create a hospital corner masterpiece, you just need to reduce airflow. At your feet, fold the blanket inward once before laying it down. This creates a pocket that traps warm air where circulation is weakest. What you're building is not a pile of blankets. You're building a heat envelope, a small, stable atmosphere generated by your own body. And here's what's remarkable. Once that microclimate stabilizes, it takes very little additional heat to maintain it. That's why people in unheated cabins could sleep through sub-freezing nights with surprisingly modest materials. Their system reduced heat loss so effectively that the body's natural output was enough. Now let's talk about one of the biggest hidden mistakes in modern bedrooms: overheating the room. When you keep your bedroom very warm before sleep, your body doesn't prepare for thermal regulation the same way. Then, as the night progresses and your core temperature naturally drops, the contrast feels sharper. A slightly cooler room paired with a stable bedding system often produces deeper, more consistent sleep than a hot room with loose blankets. It's stability that matters, not excess. This is especially important for older adults. As we age, our bodies regulate temperature less efficiently. We lose heat faster and regain it more slowly. That means small insulation mistakes feel bigger. A properly layered bed can compensate for that biological shift far better than cranking up the thermostat. And here's something almost nobody considers: your breathing. Every exhale releases warm, moist air. If that air escapes freely, you lose both heat and humidity from your immediate environment. But when your bedding forms a gentle enclosure, some of that warmth remains within your microclimate. You're not trapping carbon dioxide or suffocating yourself. You're simply reducing uncontrolled airflow. That's the difference between a sealed envelope and an open system. Modern bedding markets love the word breathable, and breathability has its place, but uncontrolled breathability can mean uncontrolled heat loss. Balance is the key. Now, let's address the psychological shift this requires. We've been trained to think that comfort equals softness and aesthetics, coordinated sets, fluffy textures, uniform materials. But performance doesn't care about aesthetics. The most effective cold weather systems in history were mismatched combinations of whatever worked: a wool military blanket, a hand-stitched quilt, a cotton sheet worn thin over decades. They weren't pretty, they were precise. Today, you can recreate that precision without abandoning modern convenience. You don't need to live like it's 1820. You just need to stop thinking like it's 2020 marketing. Add diversity to your layers. Mix materials intentionally. Think about moisture, trapped air, and bottom insulation before you think about style. And here's why this matters beyond comfort. Power grids fail. Winter storms intensify. Energy costs fluctuate. If you ever find yourself in a house without heat for 12 hours overnight, your bed becomes your primary shelter. In that moment, knowledge outranks luxury. A $400 synthetic comforter might feel impressive when the thermostat is set to 70 degrees, but in a 45-degree bedroom during a blackout, technique wins. Layer beneath, seal the edges, trap still air, manage moisture. This isn't fear-based thinking, it's resilience-based thinking. Our ancestors didn't panic every winter, they prepared quietly. They built systems that worked whether conditions were ideal or brutal. And here's the empowering part. You can test this tonight. Not during a storm, not during an emergency, just on a normal evening. Add a layer beneath you. Adjust your top layers into a tighter seal. Reduce gaps at your shoulders and feet. Pay attention to how often you wake up. Notice whether that 3 a.m. chill still hits. Notice whether your sleep feels deeper, steadier, calmer. Because warmth isn't just physical, it's neurological. When your body senses stable temperature, your nervous system relaxes. Cortisol drops, micro-awakenings decrease. You don't just feel warmer, you feel safer. 200 years ago, warmth meant survival. Today, it still does in subtle ways. A stable sleep environment improves recovery, immune response, and emotional regulation. It reduces the stress your body experiences overnight, all from something as simple as how you fold a blanket. That's the power of forgotten knowledge. We live in an era obsessed with upgrades, smart beds, temperature-regulating pads, subscription bedding brands promising revolutionary comfort. But sometimes the most powerful upgrade is understanding. Understanding how heat moves, understanding how air behaves, understanding how moisture steals warmth. When you grasp those fundamentals, you're no longer dependent on marketing claims. You're designing your own system. And that's what our ancestors mastered. They didn't have more, they knew more. So tonight, before you crawl under your comforter the same way you always have, pause. Look at your bed differently. Ask yourself, where is heat escaping? What is beneath me? Are my layers working together or just stacked? Because once you see your bed as a thermal system instead of a decorative arrangement, everything changes. You stop chasing thicker blankets. You start building smarter ones. And in a world where storms are stronger, grids are fragile, and comfort is increasingly automated, that knowledge is more valuable than ever. If this opened your eyes, try it tonight. Test it for a week. And if you wake up warmer, calmer, and more rested, you'll understand something most people never will. Warmth isn't about having the newest thing. It's about mastering the oldest principles. Stay warm, stay aware, and remember, your mattress doesn't get the final say. You do.